Everyone, this is an introductory video into using Adobe XD. In particular, I'm going to focus on trying to show you a few of the basics to get your persona started. So here you can see I've got my Adobe XD opening dialog window, and I've got a couple different documents that I can choose from here. For this one, since I'm trying to create something that's about the size of a piece of paper, I'm going to choose the custom size. And for the measurements of an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, in pixels, that's going to be 612 pixels wide and 792 pixels tall. So 792 pixels is 11 inches and 612 pixels is 8.5 inches. And you can do this by measuring, by multiplying 72 pixels per inch. In any case, I've got my custom size dimensions entered. I'll just click create. You can see now that I've got my new document, and it is oriented like a regular piece of paper. So I probably want landscape for this design. That's what I've got planned out in my head. Your document might be landscape or it might be portrait, depending on whatever whatever your design plan is. In order to switch this over to landscape, I just make sure that it is selected. You can tell the artboard is selected by this highlight. If, by the way, you're not showing the same thing that I've got, you make sure that your layers menu is selected. You might start off with something like this for document assets, or it might be for plugins. But if you select layers, then you should see your artboard here. And once it's selected, you can just click this orientation button here, and it will switch over to landscape. I'm going to zoom in a little bit by holding down my Command or Control key and zooming in by scrolling my mouse wheel. Control plus and Control minus will also zoom in and out. You'll see here in the sidebar, I've got the selection tool and some different tools. Right after the name of the tool, ellipse, it then has a letter in parentheses, E, and that is the hotkey. That's the keyboard keystroke that allows you to create that shape. So the keyboard shortcut for rectangle is R, and if I want to draw a rectangle, I just type the R key and drag out a rectangle. In order to select an object, I need to use the select tool, and right now I'm just going to create a rectangle that is the size of my background. So I'll make sure that I've clicked into my layer, and I'm just going to draw out a rectangle that fits the size of my document. Then I will resize it so that it fits perfectly. And I will remove the border, and I'm going to add a fill by clicking on this fill dialog here. And you can see I've got a bunch of different colors. I'm going to choose a purple, and we're going to choose something up in this area for the color. Now that's all well and good. I'm going to copy this color code here. I want something a bit more involved than this flat color. So I'm going to change the solid color to a linear gradient. And now I've got a bit more complex interface here. I've got this gradient here. I'm going to drag this piece over to this corner and this bottom piece over to this corner. Now the gradient is running at an angle. And in order to change the color of the top, I will right click and paste in the color I just copied, which happens to be the one we've got there. And down, I'll click on this color stop and paste in that same color again. Now I can arrange it a little bit so that we get a nice gradient. And then I'm just going to click this plus button and save that gradient so I can bring it back again if I want to. All right, I've now got my rectangle. I'm going to double click on this and rename it to background. And then I'm going to lock that layer by clicking the lock icon. And you can see it now has a lock here, and that way I won't accidentally select it or change it. All right, so we've got one layer done. I'm gonna go back to my artboard and I'm gonna rename this to my persona. There we go. And when I double click on that icon, we now have the layers. All right, very good. I'd like to bring in an image. I've got one here on my desktop, and I'm just going to drag this over and drop it into my document. You could also do it with the object menu item. You can see my image is quite large, so holding down the shift key, I'm going to drag my mouse wheel and resize it. Till it is about the size that I want it to be. There's a guide that will appear when I reach it in the right spot. Yep, that is about where I want it. Not sure exactly, but this is good enough for now. You can see now this has another layer. And I want to create a backdrop for my image, so I'm going to use the R key and create a new rectangle. This rectangle is going to span most of the width of my page. And now that I have created the rectangle, I'm going to switch to the select key and drag this down until it's centered. And then I'm going to rearrange the layers. So I'm clicking down on this rectangle and now I'm dragging it downward until it is below the persona pick. And because it's below it, now the persona pick appears above it. Very good. I can now lock that in place. I'm going to add one more rectangle. This one's going to be right behind the picture itself. So now I'm just resizing it. I'm going to drag this below the persona pick. And I'm going to remove the border on that and change the fill color to that gradient that I selected earlier. And I'm going to reverse the direction of that gradient so that I can have a nice opposite effect. And we'll maybe move this up a little bit more and drag this down a little bit more. All right. That will be our second linear gradient. All right. I do want to lock that in place. I'm going to go back to rectangle 1 and unlock that because I forgot to remove the border. So I'll just delete the border on that and then I will lock it back into place again. Now finally, I want to get my profile pic. Whoops. Created a layer by accident. I'm just going to delete it. Using the select tool, I want to select my profile pic. I'm just going to slot that into place nicely there. And I do want to adjust my rectangle a little bit just so that it lines up perfectly with the picture. All right, in good shape. Can now lock all of those things. And in fact, what I'm going to do is unlock all of them and holding down the Control key if you're on Windows or the Command key if you're on Mac, going to select each of those and Control G or Command G will group them together. The other way you can do this is under Object Group. And when I've grouped them, we can now call this group the background group, and then I can lock the whole group. There we go. Now it's time for me to create some text. So I'll use the T key, or you can just use the text creation tool, which is over here. The T key is the keyboard shortcut. I'll drag out an area for my text to appear. Clicking in here, I've got some different options. I'm going to make sure that my text color is visible, and I'll start typing some text. Persona name. We'll grab the selection tool, drag this over, and I could, at this point, change my font to something like, we'll just grab Futura for now, and we'll make this bold. There we go, and I'll make another text area underneath it, and we'll call this the user type. So this will be persona user type. Now this is obviously the same size as the headline, and I want to create some hierarchy. So I'm going to select all of this type. We'll change it from bold down to medium. Actually, we'll go medium italic, and we'll change the font size from 20 pixels down to 14 pixels. And then we'll change the color of the fill to be a little bit lighter. I'll save that color so I can use it later. And there we go. With my selection tool, I'll reposition this text a little bit. There we go. So now I've got my main headline and my secondary text here. Okay. I'm going to continue with this style. So we will Control D to duplicate it, and you can see it got duplicated over here. I'll just drag this down a little bit. This will be my first category. I'm going to change it from medium italic to condensed extra bold, and we're going to call this category 1, and then duplicate that out again, and from condensed extra bold we'll just change this to medium. We'll put it down to 12 pixels, and we're going to darken up the text a little bit so it's more visible. I'll save this swatch. Actually, I want it a bit darker than that. Put it down to something like that. Now I'll remove this swatch here. Well, worry about that later. And this will be some lorem ipsum dolor sit amet. This is some placeholder text. All right, just a few other things I wanted to show you. If I wanted to bring in some icons, then I need to locate those icons. Usually they're on your desktop, but I'm going to show you some SVGs that I've got here. These are some brand icons, so I'll click on this apple.svg, and I'm going to copy it and bring it into my document and paste it into my document. See, now I have the Apple icon here. I can change the fill and make it something that fits my theme a little bit better. I also can resize it, or I can even edit it point by point if I so choose. I'm going to just bring in a few icons here. So let's say I want to list some of the brands that this user likes. I'll create a new category, and I don't need this text there. We'll call this category 2. And we'll have his first brand. We'll copy, paste that in. That will be his second brand. Looks like I've got to resize it a little bit. We'll change the fill, like that new color I just defined, and so on. So this is how I would go about developing my persona. You saw some different versions of it, but I do have a finished version here. There were some few adjustments that I've done. but for the most part, I followed this process. I hope this has been helpful.